welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk to you guys about gold-backed bonds. I think they're coming. This is a new product, and I really think that something like gold-backed bonds or something similar is in the future, in the near term, for the United States. I say this because President Trump is talking about auditing Fort Knox and the gold reserves, and as many of you may know, the US dollar was backed by gold until the early 70s, and Nixon got rid of that. But now that the US government has to refinance trillions and trillions of dollars, and the interest rates are pretty sticky, they don't seem to want to go down for a number of reasons. And with $7 to $9 trillion of debt that need to be refinanced, even a 0.5% point or 1% makes a huge difference. This is like tens and tens of billions of dollars every year of interest, hundreds of billions of dollars, and even trillions over 10 years or 15 years in interest. What is happening is that other nations around the world may not be willing to purchase US bonds at the same rate and in the same amount as in the last 5, 10, or 15 years. That's because of socioeconomic and planetary reasons, and the way that the economy is modifying, is changing in the world right now. And US-backed bonds would allow the US government to pay less interest, because there would be the additional guarantee of gold behind the bonds. I don't think there's going to be like a guarantee of gold behind the currency in general, but if you're the US government and you want to sell bonds and refinance the debt, backing the bonds with gold would be a great way to save money. And that would allow people to have more safety, to say, I'll buy the US bonds, and I know that if something happens, if something crazy were to happen, there's a default, or even if the credit rating of the United States changes, that the bond is backed by gold. This is something that is not spoken outwardly about in the financial world right now, but I think that is something that we may hear more about in the future. And that would have 5 great benefits that go beyond just allowing the US government to refinance debt at low rates. One would be that it would restore trust in the dollar. And that's because if the dollar is acquired by foreigners, that they have to do that to buy the bonds. They have to buy the bonds in dollars, and so they have to acquire dollars. And so if they acquire dollars and the dollars in that bond are backed by gold, that would restore trust in the dollar in the financial market. And that is something that we know after the passage of the tariffs has been a concern. Then an additional benefit of gold-backed bonds would be that it would lead to more disciplined government spending. And that's because in the last 20 years, the government has been able to borrow as much as they wanted, because they were monetizing the debt, and they were saying like, oh, I need $1 trillion, let's just issue $1 trillion of bonds. I need 2 trillion, let's issue $2 trillion of bonds. But if you have to back it by gold, you're limited. You cannot issue bonds more than the gold you have. So once you run out of the gold to back the bonds, you cannot issue more bonds. And so that's why it will force the US government to be more disciplined, because you wouldn't have unlimited ability to borrow, but your ability to borrow would be only limited by the amount of gold that you have. Another added benefit of gold-backed bonds would be that they would be an inflation hedge for investors. That's because we know that the worry is that you lend money to the US government for 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years, and the US government agrees to pay you a certain interest rate, but if the inflation is higher than that interest rate, you're losing money in real terms, because the money that you get in the future is worth less. So by backing the bonds with gold, that will be an inflation hedge, because if there is very high inflation, usually the price of gold goes up. And so if your bonds are backed by gold, that's an inflation hedge. That's an extra security. An additional benefit, and this would be mostly for the US government, is that backing the bonds with gold would ensure that there's sufficient demand for the bonds. Basically, the US would be able to call the shots as to how much to pay in interest for the most part. It wouldn't just be determined by the market. Yes, it would be determined by the market, but the US government would have much more leverage in deciding how much to pay. And so it would also increase the global demand because there is a lot of demand for gold. And so if you're able to mix the two, because the problem with buying just gold is that gold doesn't pay interest. If you buy an ounce of gold, the 10 ounces of gold, and put them in your closet or in the pillow, you're not getting interest. But if you buy gold-backed bonds, you're gonna get interest from the US government on the money that you lend to the US government, and you're gonna have the security of the gold at the back end. That's why it's a win-win. The gold-backed bonds would be a win for the US government because it would pay lesser interest rates and the borrowing would be more stable, and it would be a win for the lender, for the people that buy the bonds, because it would be an inflation hedge and it would be a much, much safer investment. And for everybody, an additional benefit that would be a long-term benefit, and this would benefit not only the US government, it would benefit US citizens, the people in the US, but also benefit the people all over the world and investors, you know, Japanese, Chinese, whoever that buys US bond, is that there would be more economic stability. There would be less manipulation, because the fact that you cannot just manipulate the currency because it's tied to the gold would mean that there would be less bubbles, that there would be less risk in the future. And so with a stable system, and the stability would be given by the gold, everything would be safer for everybody and much more stable. The currency manipulation is a huge risk in the market for lenders, for the people that buy the bonds. And so backing them with gold would reduce the risk of manipulation. So there are all these benefits. And to recap, not just the benefit for the US government to refinance at lower rates, which would be a gigantic benefit, and that would be probably the benefit that drives the decision to issue gold-backed bonds. But there's all these other benefits: the stability, the hedge against inflation, the fact that there can be less market manipulation, the increased demand from the world for gold-backed bonds. I think this would be a gigantic success. And that is why the US government and many other governments all over the world are having so much demand for gold, because not just the US could issue gold-backed bonds. Every state, every nation all over the world could. China could, Korea could, Japan could, Italy could, everyone could. So that is why all the central banks, all the nations are trying to hoard gold, because gold at the end of the day is going to be the ultimate guarantee, the ultimate collateral that you can give to other nations, to other people to lend you money. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you soon with another video. And if you want to watch more, look up here, and this is the video that the algorithm recommends for you to watch next. Thank you.